Hello everyone, my name is Eric Jones. Welcome to the course entitled Pest Management. This information comes directly from Chapter 3 in your North Carolina Pesticide Applicator Certification Core Manual. Now hopefully you've already watched my lectures entitled Natural Pest Controls and IPM for the Landscape Manager. This lecture here will tie those in together because this is the information directly from your textbook and the information that you are going to see on the state exam. And I wanted to add that natural pest controls and IPM for the landscape manager in there to give you guys a better understanding of what integrated pest management is. So this chapter should be a review for most of you. Our objectives for this course, we're going to know the 4 major pest groups. We're going to know the 3 choices for pest management goals. We're going to explain why identification, treatment, and monitoring are important. We're going to describe IPM strategies. We're going to know the causes of failures of control methods that we use in the landscape. Guys, if it's using the same chemical over and over again, it's not going to be efficient in years to come. We're going to understand and prevent pesticide resistance. A lot of insects are very responsive to developing that resistance to the same insecticide that we use over and over again. And they pass it on down from generation to generation. So what is a pest? And if you've taken my classes before, you've seen this lovely picture. They are troublesome, they are annoying, and they can cause damages, but not in every situation. Now, they're either going to be an insect, animal, weed, microorganism, or a pathogen. Now let's think about what we do for a living. We're landscape contractors, we're landscape professionals. We're out there spraying pesticides on clients' property. So let's think of a weed. A weed that we deal with every single day here in the triad in one yard is a pest, but in the next it's not. Because we're in that transition zone because we have warm season grass clients and we have cool season grass clients. Now, Bermuda grass in a cool season yard is a complete pest. We want to get rid of it. But our client next door who has a Bermuda lawn, Bermuda grass is not a pest. But for both of them, both of those clients with the Bermuda grass and the tall fescue, if that Bermuda grass gets in their shrub bed or coming up in the cracks of their sidewalks or the cracks in the asphalt, it is a weed. It is a pest in that situation. So the same species can be a pest depending on where it is located. And so we have to identify correctly what they are and educate our clients that, hey, you know, you've got Bermuda lawn, you're probably going to get a little bit of Bermuda grass inside your shrub beds. It's going to creep over. It's going to come up in your sidewalk. So education is always best, but there's 4 major types of weeds, invertebrates, disease agents, and pathogens, and vertebrates. Vertebrate biology was one of the coolest classes I took at Clemson. I loved that class, talking about the evolution or evolving of these little rodents and other species with the development of the backbone. It was really, really cool. But again, weeds, that's what we deal with on a day-to-day basis as landscape professionals. Yes, we're going to deal with invertebrates, the insects, and then occasionally, yes, we're going to deal with some of our clients' shrubs, trees, and definitely the turf grass getting a fungus or disease on them. Very rarely will we deal with a vertebrate unless it's a mole or a vole, but we're not going to get into the structural pest control where we're dealing with mice inside the house. Management goals. We have prevention, suppression, and eradication, and we have a little bit of information about each on the next slides. Prevention, action taken to keep the pest from occurring, to actually keep it, prevent it from coming here. Pre-emergent fertilize in the spring, guys. We do not want to see crabgrass, so we're putting out a preventative or a pre-em fertilize. Fungicide when conditions are favorable. You have a client that doesn't know when to water their lawn. They've got a new irrigation system, and the first thing Mr. Smith wants to do is get home and play with that new Wi-Fi controller and turn that water on and off, and he's doing that at 5 o'clock in the day. Well, you've just put out your last fertilizer application a couple weeks ago, and he's playing with that irrigation. It's getting 95 degrees, and he's going to bed, turning that water off, but that grass goes to sleep itself too, and it's wet. It didn't have time to dry off. So you're probably going to have to put out a pre-emergent fungicide in that situation for your client. And then termites. You know, here you can see they're spraying underneath the slab. You've got to do that before you pour a slab or any concrete that touches the house. So they're putting down a preventative termite treatment in this picture. Suppression, we want to suppress it, treating the existing pest to control the amount of damage that it can cause. Doesn't eliminate it, it reduces to a tolerable level, which is going to be different for each client, and then it allows the natural enemies to gain control. You want Mother Nature and those natural pest controls to stick around, because if you eradicate the pest, those natural enemies pack up, they jump on the next lawnmower or the next car out of town, and they're moving to somewhere else that they can get a free meal. So we want to keep those guys around. Eradication, eradicate, to get rid of something completely or destroy something bad. That is the definition. We want complete and total elimination of the pest. We probably don't want that though, unless it has to affect public health, or people getting sick, or possibly losing an entire crop if you're a farmer. And this usually will require either Uncle Sam stepping in, or at least the state of North Carolina with regulatory control. And types of pesticide, guys. This is table 3.2 in your textbook. Know this, become familiar with these. I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but the major ones that we're going to deal with are herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, all three of those as landscape professionals. We're not going to get into the rodents. We might do some treatments for mites, possibly some nematodes that may be more used, maybe a little bit more in agriculture. We'll get into some maybe some repellents, if you're doing mosquito type treatments. Growth regulators we're going to use, you're going to prune those dwarf Burford hollies, and when you get that little new growth on it, you probably are hitting it with some growth regulators, so you don't have to prune so much the rest of the year. But those are probably the ones that we use the most as landscape professionals, and use them for our clients. The other ones, different types of pest control, unless you are doing strictly, if you are an ornamental and tree expert or company, and that's all you're doing, or you have a division in your company, they're probably going to put out a lot more of that. But the typical lawn maintenance contractor or landscape manager are going to deal with those four that I mentioned. There are different types of each of these pesticides. Again, with pesticides, we have insecticides, herbicides, fungicides are the ones that we use the most. But underneath those, there's different categories with it. So just look at the insecticides here. We have organophosphates, organochlorines, carbamates, pyrethroids, botanicals, insecticidal soaps, and microbial products that we will put out when it comes to using an insecticide to get rid of these unwanted pests for our clients. And guys, that talks about when it comes to pesticide resistance, if you're using the same pyrethroid over and over again, the insects are going to develop resistance to it. So you have to type up the different types of insecticides that are out there on the product. And there's multiple ways to get rid of an insect, a particular insect. The mode of action. Here we're looking at one for herbicide, but the mode of action is how a pesticide works. Pesticides within the same class have similar structure and use the same mode of action. Here we have a pre-emergent. We talked about putting that out in the spring for crabgrass. That's going to be your grassy weeds, and actually that's going to help a little bit with your broadleaf weeds as a pre-emergent. But then we have post-emergent. We have selective and non-selective. Selective herbicides are going to target just broadleaf weeds, so we can spray that over our turf grass. But a non-selective herbicide, we can't spray over our turf grass because it'll kill the grass as well. Roundup, being the most popular pesticide herbicide out there, is non-selective. You spray it on turf grass, it's going to kill it. You're spraying it to get rid of clover in your yard, well, it's going to kill all of your turf grass as well. So you'd want to use something that does not target everything. It's only targeting the clover and the broadleaf weeds. And that's what you would want to use. Selectivity, again, that's what we just talked about. If a product is selective, then it may control a certain pest or a particular stage in the development. And then non-selective products will affect a broad range. It'll kill everything in sight. Systemic and contact. Systemic is absorbed by plants through the leaves and by animals through the skin and is transported throughout the system. Contact is not absorbed and it stays on the surface of the plant or the animal. Thorough spray coverage is necessary when using a contact pesticide because it only affects, well, it's only effective to the exposed parts too. But yes, contact pesticides, and depending on what time of day and stuff, guys, it may come a shower a little bit later. It's going to wash it off. You might get a dew that's going to wash it off, and so you got to be particular with that. You do a systemic, it's going to absorb and go through the body. It's going to do a better job for you. We use probably more systemics in our business than anything. Residual contact pesticides may only remain for a few hours, but residual pesticides remain from weeks to years. And as we're talking here in the last bullet, you know, DDT, guys, they're finding it way up north where they didn't use it. They used it in agriculture, you know, back as, you know, years and years and years ago. I don't even remember hearing my dad talk about using DDT, but it is a pesticide that they're still finding remnants of it in parts of the world that they didn't even use it. I mean, it's just that bad, and it was translocated. So what is Integrated Pest Management, or IPM? And hopefully you've seen the 2 lectures that I mentioned prior to seeing this one, but it is an inspection. It is the proper identification of the pests that are in the area. It is monitoring how much do we have, what actions do we need to take to get the pest under control. And again, like I said, under control, not necessarily eradicating it, but to get it down to a manageable and tolerable level. And then evaluate it. What method worked? What methods didn't work? And you got to keep a record of this when you're doing an IPM plan, so you've always got information to go back onto. And integrated pest management is the coordinated use of appropriated control tactics to reduce pests and their damage to the acceptable level. Components of IPM, again, identify and understand, monitor it, determine the threshold. That's going to be different for each client that you have. Some clients are not going to accept 1 bit of clover in their yard, while others will be like, hey, it doesn't bother me. It stays green all summer and blooms once a week. I love it. So you've got those 2 different clients, guys. You can consider the management options. You need to implement them, and then again, record and evaluate. This is what we're going to do within our IPM plan. And guys, you start sitting around talking around IPM to your clients, next thing you know, you're charging a trip visit just to monitor it and look at it. You're not putting out any chemical or anything, and you're getting paid just as much or more just to go out and monitor these things for your clients. So really pump that up. Talk about it. Be the steward of the land. Tell your clients that you can implement an integrated pest management plan for their properties, and a lot of them are going to eat it up, and it's the right thing to do. Identify and understand. Most common pest control failure is incorrectly identifying the pest and lack of information. And people always get these 2 mixed up, the vole and the mole. Both of them are ugly, but I'd much rather see the vole than that mole. If I seen that thing pop up out of the ground, I'd probably freak out a little bit. But that vole, I mean, it looks like your common house mouse. Monitor the levels. Scouting and trapping are great ways to monitor the levels. Sticky paper, traps, but then always monitor the weather and the temperature data, because it could be something else. Again, it's proper identification. Think about it. Think about the tomato hornworm in the last lecture that you saw. You know, they like the hot summers, but a wet winter is going to reduce their levels because they're down in the ground in the wintertime, and that wet soil is not good for them. So, you know, what's happened? You know, did we have a dry summer? I mean, did we have a dry winter? So, hey, automatically you might start thinking we're going to have a lot of tomato hornworms probably, right? And if it gets hotter during the summer. So all of that plays into what's going on, you know, in your landscapes. Determine the threshold. It's the point where action is needed to control the pest. Is it economic or is it aesthetic? If it's simply aesthetic, don't worry about it. And if it's going to affect the health and welfare of the public, then Uncle Sam's probably going to step in and we're going to have regulatory controls, and that's when they might do some eradication methods. But small populations do not always require action. If you see a few bugs, don't worry about it. You know, I like seeing that picture of lettuce, a head of lettuce beside a clean head of lettuce with no holes in it or anything, just picture perfect, but then right beside one with all these like holes in it where insects have ate it. People are always going to choose that one that doesn't have any holes. Well, guess what that one with the holes that doesn't have any holes tells us? It tells us that it was treated with a pesticide. I'd rather eat the lettuce that's got a few holes in it, because I'm going to wash it off and I'm going to tear it up and put it in my salad, I'm not even going to see the holes. But what it does tell me is that there was no pesticides applied to it. They didn't spray it with insecticide. But economic, guys, if it's going to hurt the pocketbook, you may have to use a pesticide, and that's going to be different in agriculture than it is in the landscape. So what if we lose a couple plants in the landscape? But if we lose an entire crop of our agricultural product, you know, we've got to take action. Determine that threshold. Economic threshold factors. It is the stage of development of the crop, expected yield and value of the harvest. What is that going to do to it? What is the anticipated loss or damage due to the pest? And then what about the cost and effectiveness of the pest control? Sometimes it may be more expensive to apply a pesticide than to let the insects have what they're going to get anyway. You know, they've already eaten part of the crop and damaged it. If you go ahead and spray a pesticide on it, it may be more economical sense not to spray it. Just let them have what they've got, harvest what you can, and not waste the money on the pesticide. And that is shown in that graph there. You have the economic injury level, below the economic injury level, and then you have the ET and the economic injury level right here, and then you have the time. What's happening is that's when you need to take control, because once it reaches that economic injury level, it may be too late. You may lose the entire crop. So you've got to monitor it, and you want to keep it below the the economic injury level. Read more about that in the book, because the exam has a lot of information about economic injury levels and thresholds when it comes to that. Determine that threshold again. Action thresholds, not always economic. It's zero tolerance in food service, so they're going to get rid of, you know, they have to get rid of the mice and the ants and the cockroaches and everything because of any public health threats. And then the establishment of your action threshold can be difficult because there are many varying factors for it. And again, knowledge is key there, guys. Control strategies. We have natural controls. We just saw a lecture entitled Natural Pest Controls. Mother Nature works good, but we've interfered with it, and so we have to kind of bring those natural controls back and implement them and help them succeed. You know, look at the ladybug feasting right there. I mean, she's having a heyday. Applied controls can be biological, mechanical, cultural, or even changing the physical environment that the pest is in would actually get rid of it. I mean, something as simple as getting rid of cockroaches in your house, guys, or ants, is putting, you know, your dog food bowl in a moat. They're not going to get to it. They're not even going to walk over to it. Control strategies. We have natural resistance. You know, some plants are just naturally resistant to it. And why not use those plants? You know, you've got certain plants that get a certain disease, you know, just like, you know, the old school roses that we used to plant and that was always at grandma's house. They were more naturally resistant to the diseases that the hybrid roses get today. Genetic resistance. Some plants have been bred genetically to resist the pest that may be there. But then regulatory, we have the quarantine, which means, hey, get out. By the way, is one of my favorite movies. Then large scale eradication, that means they're getting rid of it, and they're going to do that by chemical means. They're going to be applying a deadly chemical when they start doing that. But implement the IPM. Select the methods that are most effective and least harmful to people in the environment when you do have to use a pesticide. Use several methods to target the pest. Non-chemical controls may have a more permanent effect. Simply removing the food source, guys, could get rid of the pest, to be honest with you. And then observe local and federal regulations when you're always doing that. Record and evaluate. The best source of information is your own records. Document it good. Some results may only be evident in the long term, and you may find that some methods are not effective at all or cause more harm than good. So keep track of it. Know what you're doing. Review your records for effectiveness of a strategy before using it again. Resistance and failure. If the same class of pesticide is used over and over again, you will create resistance. You've got to change it up, guys. Some pests will naturally be resistant, and if you use the same pesticide, you allow that resistant pest to thrive and populate and spread it from generation to generation. There's a good picture in your textbook about the one bug that is resistant, then he passes it on down to his offspring, and it gets, you know, spread through more. But then, like in the third generation, it may just be only a few pests that get killed by the pesticide because the other ones have built up that resistance, and they pass those traits down. And here is that picture in your textbook. Again, see, there's the resistant individual right there. And then, you know, a portion of the survivor's offspring are resistant, and then boom, look at it. You know, that third generation, there's only one that's really susceptible to the treatment. Delay resistance, monitor populations and only treat when necessary instead of treating on a schedule. We do that every single day, don't we? Hey, it's that time of the year. We've got to put out this chemical. We've got to put out this chemical. Well, how about go to your client's house with an IPM contract or program in place, and you're just, hey, we're here to see if you got any broadleaf weeds in your turf. Yes, you've got a little bit in the back. Instead of broadcasting your entire lawn with the tank, we're going to go get the backpack sprayer and we're going to do spot treatments. That's one way to do it. Hey, you're not applying chemicals where they're not needed, which is violation of the label, because the label is the law. And then you're only targeting that one area that needs it, and it saves you money. Rotate the pesticides. Use different ones. Do not use residual pesticides. And apply treatments in a limited area. Will reduce the population exposed to the pesticides so the resistant pests continue to breed with non-resistant pests. Good idea there. And then again, keep good records for you to always go back on. Control the failure. Common reasons why the control method failed is incorrect pest identification, incorrect dosage or application of pesticide. Hey, I'm putting too little pesticide in there. I'm not getting the correct amount. Apply those pesticides correctly, guys. And then treatment was not timed correctly. You're doing it too early or too late in the season, or too late and too early in the life cycle of the pest. And then new infestation was developed after the treatment. And there it is. That concludes Chapter 3 in your core manual. Guys, I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you.